Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norse Witch, and this week's video is a very chill Q&A. First of all though, patron shoutout. Thank you very much to Laura, Amber, Kristen, John, Phoenix, Anton, Noemi, Jenny, Tyler, Els, Betty, Misty, Cameron, Amy, Colette, Soren, Tel, Timothy, Coffee or the Honorary Gossip Squirrel, Bjorn, Scylla, Ash, Lucy and Joss. And now let's start with the questions. And we will start right off with the questions from YouTube. The first question is, have you ever felt drawn to other deities other than the Norse pantheon? And as far as I remember, the only pantheon I was ever really interested in other than the Norse pantheon was the Celtic one. Although I just remembered I was once very interested in Nyx. But yeah, that was pretty early on I was interested in Nyx. But apart from that, like, I researched a little bit about the Celtic pantheon, but I never worked or worshipped any other deities than the Norse gods and goddesses. And yeah, I think it's okay like that. I'm fine with that. I don't have the urge to work or worship any other deities. Oh, a very good question. Now that the seasons are changing, it's becoming fall slowly but surely. Do you feel your mundane and or magical routines change with the seasons? If so, what kind of changes? They definitely change because they have to. Simply, of course, because during summer we have daylight until 11 p.m. sometimes. I think that's like around the summer solstice. We have sunlight and it's light out until like 11 p.m. But then in the winter it's maybe light out until 4:30, so we don't have that much light during winter. So there's a lot of stuff that you just can't do because, for example, the place where I often take walks in, it's a cemetery, and it has different opening hours depending on the seasons. So during like the spring summer period, it's open until 9 p.m. So after work I can just go there and take a walk because it's light out and it's open. But during winter, it's only open until 6 p.m. so I can't easily take walks on weekdays after work. So that's of course something that changes because I just can't do some stuff. Also, of course, some things that will probably change for other people too is, of course, I wake up in different times. In winter I get tired pretty early because it's dark outside so early. So I tend to be just in general less energetic. I do less like heavy work, magic wise, but also mundane wise. So I tend to do more inner work, more divination. Yeah, more work with spirits. That especially increases when it's getting dark. For me personally, I get much more into working with my ancestors, with deities, with any spirits. Although I would exclude nature spirits or at least like plant spirits from that because, of course, in winter they're not as active. At least the ones outside, like my house plants, it doesn't apply to my house plants, but I think everyone's life changes. At least if you have like very noticeable seasonal changes, your routines will have to change. So yeah, winter is for me personally the time of reading a lot, drinking tea a lot, being at home a lot, even more than in summer. I mean, I'm a homebody in general, but I tend to do more cozy things, more creative things, and less things that I have to do outside. Although I really love a good winter walk when it has snowed, but it snows very rarely here, so I don't really get that many winter walks, unfortunately. Also because there's so little sunlight, I can only do that on weekends. Oh, this one is a good question because it's something that has actually happened recently. What's been your funniest spell, magical or deity experience? And that is something that has happened recently because I actually started kind of working with Loki. So I incorporated him on my deity altar and everything. And when I started, I always want to make sure that like the communication that happens did actually happen and that it's not something that I just imagined. So I asked him to send me a sign within like a week that I can't miss, because I usually tend to not realize that something is a sign. And right the next day I tried to make incense cones, and I made farting incense cones. I've researched like 2 or 3 recipes now, and the ones that I had previously done, they didn't even like burn down fully, and the ones that I made that time, they burned down fully, so it was kind of a success, but they burned down in a very weird way because there's a lot of charcoal in it, like self-lighting charcoal. It kind of burns down a little bit, and then like once a minute or so it like kind of makes a pfft sound, and like a lot of smoke comes out of it. So it's kind of like it's farting out the smoke like once a minute maybe. And it's so funny. When I first saw that, I laughed my ass off. My best friend was there with me when I made those incense cones, and we laughed so much. I still think that that was the sign from Loki that I was asking for, because that would be just so typical. So yeah, that was pretty funny. Next question: do you do anything fun and special during Halloween, practice related or not? So Halloween isn't that much of a thing in Germany, like slowly but surely, because basically everyone is hopping on the Halloween train. Germany is doing that too, so slowly but surely there's also like Halloween stuff in stores around Halloween in Germany and stuff, and people throw Halloween parties. But it's not that much of a thing, like it's not like in the US, remotely. So no, I think I've been to a Halloween party like once, and I've never really celebrated it my own. What I personally really like though is Samhain. That's maybe like the only proper Wheel of the Year Sabbath celebration that I still like celebrate, is Samhain, simply because I just like the thought of being more receptive to the other worlds, the veil thinning. And I personally feel that, as I already said, I personally feel that during fall and winter. So I just like to have a dedicated time to dive very deeply into that, but like nothing really Halloween-y. So I just tend to do a lot of ancestor work and stuff like that around Halloween, Samhain. Nothing really Halloween-y. I also don't decorate my house. I've also never really been into Halloween. I grew up in a very, very northern part of Germany, where what would be like associated with Halloween is Rummelpottlaufen, which is on New Year's. Kids dress up as scary creatures and run around town and sing at the doors of people's houses, and it's kind of similar to trick-and-treating. That was always much more like interesting to me than Halloween, because Halloween is just not a part of my culture. Rummelpottlaufen is much cooler. If you know Rummelpottlaufen, then tell me in the comments, because it's just cool. It was so fun to me as a child. Is there a certain season or time of year that you feel more connected to your practice? I would say nowadays no. There's seasons that I feel like I just like more, like I prefer to other seasons, but more in a mundane sense. My craft just completely changes depending on the season, and I get motivated and inspired to do different things in different seasons, but I don't get more active during some specific seasons. It's just different things that I do. So I mean, okay, if you would define reading more and doing more introspective work as being inactive, then maybe, but I personally don't see that as being less active, so no. I'm not more active during some specific seasons. It just changes. Okay, this one is interesting. I just recently started my journey into Norse Paganism, and I've been learning as much as I can about the practice, but was wondering if I should keep to my patron deity Odin, or should I study and get to know all of the gods? You can do whatever you want, honestly. We know that being dedicated to one deity more than others was a thing also in pre-Christian Scandinavia. So that's something that you of course can do. I personally would advise you though to just kind of maybe research like about each deity. It doesn't hurt, like doing research and connecting doesn't hurt, and who knows what you will find. Maybe you will find out that there's another deity that you really connect with. You won't know about this deity if you don't do research or like maybe connect to them once. So I would always advise you to branch out, but you can do whatever you want. If you just feel more comfortable sticking with only worshipping and working with Odin, then do that. That's also completely fine. What's the weirdest or most magical experience you've had? I think the most magical experience I've had was, or will probably always be, the moment that I kind of swore my loyalty to Odin, if you may call it that, because he was so extremely reactive. Like, I gave an offering and there was an immediate reaction of fireworks in the background and a huge blow of wind coming up. There was no wind previously, and afterwards, just right after the offering, there was a big wind. That was, I think that was the most magical experience that I've had, because it was so immediate, like immediately after the offering, all of that happened. So I guess that experience. Oh, that's a good question. How do you determine whether or not a problem or situation needs a spell? I think in Chaotic Witch Aunt's book, they have actually like some questions that they go through personally when, determining whether something needs a spell. I personally just think of like, can I achieve the same thing in the mundane world? Like, if it's something that I can easily achieve by just doing something mundanely, then I won't do magic for it, because why? Then also I try to think of, like, is it acceptable to use magic in this in this situation? Or do I feel comfortable using magic in that situation? Or would it be maybe something, I don't know, influencing someone else's will that I'm personally not really comfortable with? So then I wouldn't use a spell. And then also it's like, it's a question of like, do I really need it? And if you are unsure, you can always do some divination before spells. That's something that's recommended either way. So that you can kind of figure out, like, if I do cast the spell, what happens? Should I do that? What happens if I do that? What happens if I don't do it? You get much more insight into it if you do some divination beforehand, so you can also do that. But in general, it's just some questions of, do I really need it? Do I have to use magic for it? Can I achieve it in the mundane world? Stuff like that. New follower here. Do you follow Freya or Thor? Both. Both. Actually, my deity altar is getting pretty full. How can I be a witch without worshipping anyone? I'm sorry, I really hope that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like nowadays, especially through witch talk, it's so common that witches or people who identify as witches also worship deities. Let's just focus on deity work, because you probably meant deities. I personally think you don't have to worship any deities to be a witch. You don't have to. If you don't want to, then don't. You can be a witch without worshipping deities. It's completely fine. Nobody expects you to do that. Just because it's a common practice, you don't have to. I think I went without worshipping deities for 3 years or something, and I was completely fine. Who knows, maybe at some point you will find an affinity for a specific pantheon or a specific deity, and then maybe you will start worshipping deities. But if you don't want to at this point, then don't. Have you ever been hexed or magically attacked before? I don't think so. I don't think so. I have only had a magical ward like attached to a plant quite recently, and it hasn't died yet, so that's a good sign. Apart from that, I don't think so. I mean, you never know for sure, but I think if I would have been like actually hexed or cursed, I think I would be able to notice that, because hexing and cursing is pretty intense. It's possible that I was jinxed and that I just didn't notice. Possible. It's also possible that I was hexed or cursed and my protections just warded it off, so I didn't notice. But I don't think so. I don't think so. And I also hope that I don't give anyone a reason to hex or curse me. I don't want to be a person that someone feels like they have to or want to hex or curse. I just don't want to be that person. So I just hope nobody did. Best Norse books, how to learn runes, rune spreads. So runes, I have a separate playlist actually on the runes. I am in the process of filming a lot of videos on the runes. I recently finished the history and also the meanings of the runes, and the next videos that will come are like how to do divination with the runes, different spreads, stuff like that, and also how to do magic with the runes. So if you're interested in that, that will all come sooner or later. I try to sprinkle these videos in from time to time because they don't do that well on YouTube. Books on Norse magic and Norse mythology and stuff. I want to film a separate video on that. I've seen those questions pop up again and again and again with basically every single Q&A that I've filmed. I really want to film a separate video on that. The only problem is, and I will be very honest here, the only problem is that for a long time I didn't know about the fact that Idre Thorsson and Freyja Aswin are very problematic authors. So these two authors were the ones that I was primarily reading in the beginning when I got into Norse magic and Norse mythology. And I don't really want to film a video and recommend their books. I just want to have more recommendations for you than books by problematic authors, because, oh, not fun. So I'm currently just in the process of reading a lot of books so that I can see whether I can recommend them or not. I don't know when the video will come up, maybe in like 1, 2, 3 months, I don't know. I'm working on it. The video will come, I promise. Oh, interesting. The difference between Asatru and Norse Pagan. It depends on who you ask, I guess. I mean, Asatru is an official religion in Iceland. It's an official organization, like a religious organization in Iceland. That's why I personally don't call myself Asatru, because I'm not like affiliated with the organization of Asatru. But I mean, Asatru only means you're true or loyal to the Aesir. And like some people interpret that as only worshipping the Aesir and not like the Vanir, for example, or Jotuns. So Loki, for example, would probably also not be a part of that, or Hel, for example. So that's why a lot of people don't call themselves Asatru. And yeah, I don't call myself Asatru because I'm not affiliated with the organization. I'm not part of Asatru. So I just go by Norse Pagan or Heathen. I just kind of feel like that's a more open term. Silly, but do you have a fire alarm? And if so, how does it not go off all the time? I do. I actually have a fire alarm in every room apart from the bathroom and the kitchen. You have to have those in Germany. And I think that's a good thing, because I want to know if my house is burning down. One thing is my ceilings are very high. The building that I'm living in is about 100 years old, and back then the ceilings were very high, so my ceilings are, I think, 3.5 meters high, 4, something like that. So there's a lot of room. So if I just light like a stick of incense, nothing will happen. The fire alarms aren't that sensitive to that. Also, I don't think they're actually like smoke sensitive. There are ones that are smoke sensitive, but there are also ones that are heat sensitive. I don't know which ones I have because they were exchanged recently. And if I do something, I mean, I have had my fire alarms go off at least like 3 or 4 times. So when I know that I'm burning something in my home, which in general I wouldn't really recommend because there's a lot of smoke involved and it's just a mess. If I do something like that, like for example burning paper that will set up a lot of smoke, I will just like take off my fire alarms. But I just do that like for the spell and then I put them up again afterwards. Wouldn't recommend that, children. Please keep your fire alarms up. But also when I know that I'm doing something that will set up a lot of smoke, I will do that with the windows wide open and my balcony door wide open, and I will burn it right at the balcony door so that the smoke can just go right out the balcony door. What do you recommend to Freyja devotees? Sex? Like, what I see a lot of the times is people only worshipping her as a love deity, and there's much more to her than love. Of course, love is like a big part of what she's a sovereign for, but that's not the only thing she's about. And I feel like giving her like sexual pleasure as an offering is very powerful, and also getting into Seidr, or in general getting into magic, is also not something that I would very, very much recommend to any Freyja devotee, because I mean the Vanir in general were magically very powerful, and I mean Freyja especially, so probably do that. Could you share more about the coven you work with and the type of workings you all do? Honestly, I would love to film a separate video with my coven, but I don't know if they would be up to that. Us as a coven, we are now, like in the inner circle, we're 3 people, but we have 2 devotees. Why did I say it like that? We have 2 devotees, and we're a very mixed coven. Like we have people now from the US, from Germany, from Syria, and from Lithuania. So we are a very mixed coven. All of us, we are very different people and we are into very different things. We're basically a confetti cake coven because there's like everything in there. And that's what I personally love. The fact that we're also an English-speaking coven opens just our possibilities up to a lot of people. We also do public meetups, and that's always very interesting because since we do it all in English, like all of the non-Germans around our area, they will come to our meetups because of course we speak English, and we have met so many amazing people. Like I think at the last meetup we had someone from Nepal, and it was so interesting talking to him. I guess you could say we are focused on British traditional witchcraft because our high priestess is very much into British traditional witchcraft. And yeah, she's just the one with the most experience. She's basically leading the whole thing. I mean, she's the high priestess, that's like her thing. Apart from that, we basically throw all of our interests into one pot, basically. There's not like one person saying what we have to do. We just formed the whole tradition together. We were 3 people creating the coven together, basically, so each of us like brought one deity into the coven, so it's a wild mix because it's Athena, Freya, and Lucifer, so it's very interesting. It's a confetti cake. Our coven is a confetti cake. Your spirit animal, tell us the story of how, when, why, if it's not too personal, of course. I personally don't believe I have a spirit animal because that's a Native American practice, so I don't have a spirit animal. There were quite some animal spirits who served as like guides, or who had the role as like temporary spirit guides for me, and who just left after some time. But I guess who you're probably referring to is my Fylgja, which I really want to film a separate video on the Fylgja. But to make that clear, the Fylgja is not an animal spirit. They present themselves as an animal sometimes, but they can also present themselves to you as a person. That's like the 2 forms that I have encountered. And my Fylgja presents either as a lynx or as a woman with pretty wild, like wavy brown hair, like very like big hair and very, yeah. I don't know, she looks kind of wild. I like her. Oh, that's a very good question. Could you imagine writing a book? If you had asked me that question 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said no. But actually, I would love to write a book. I would actually really like to write a book, maybe about like how to approach deity work and how to approach Norse paganism from a more intuitive perspective. Maybe that's Odin's influence. I've kind of started getting more interested in writing in general and maybe trying to write some poetry. We will see. But yeah, I would love to write a book. Oh, were you nervous before you got your hand tattoos? I'm getting mine today, a bit excited, nervous. I was very nervous before I got my hand tattoos because I always heard that it's awful, like the pain is awful. And I have to say, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it's not fun, especially because my hand tattoos, they're not just on the hand, they're also around the wrist and stuff like that. So there were a lot of spaces that were uncomfortable, but it wasn't awful. Like my chest piece was worse. My head tattoo was much worse. So I don't think it was that bad. Okay, let's do the last 2 questions because my camera's overheating. What are your top 5 favorite movies? Let me just think about my comfort movies, because I'm a person who rewatches movies all the time because it's just a comfort thing. Whenever I'm stressed, I rewatch my comfort movies. Let's see. I mean, one of my biggest comfort movies is the first Fantastic Beasts. Of course, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit series, both of them. Don't come at me, Twilight. It's a teenager memory. It's a very, very comforting teenager memory. So Twilight is also a comfort movie of mine. Oh, Mamma Mia has become a very, very big comfort movie. I don't love it. I don't feel like it's inspiring or something deep or something. It's just comfortable. I don't know, it's comfortable. And I really love a lot of Studio Ghibli. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Or is it Studio Ghibli or Studio Ghibli? I don't know. But I really love a lot of their movies. Like, for example, oh my god, what are they called in English? Howl's Moving Castle, I really like that. Princess Mononoke. Is it pronounced that in English? I don't know. If you would ask me for like the movies that I actually like really enjoy watching because they're like challenging to me, I like challenging movies actually. I would say like either like fantasy and sci-fi stuff. I just in general really enjoy that. But apart from that, I really like what I call mindfuck movies. So movies that have a lot of twists and turns, like unexpected turns. I don't really, like when I'm not wanting a comfort movie, because comfort movie zone is a different area, but when I'm not looking for a comfort movie, I'm looking for something that does not have the typical happy end, because I think that's incredibly boring. And like, don't get me wrong, with comfort movies, I want something boring because I don't want to have to like think about it. But usually I like movies that I have to think about. So movies like Who Am I? That's actually a German movie that I personally really, really love. I think it's basically the only German movie that I love because German movies and TV shows are a shithole. But Who Am I? Inception, like stuff like that. Shutter Island, I really love Shutter Island, so I really love movies like that too. If you have recommendations for that genre, then put them in the comments because I'm always looking for new ones. And then lastly, it's a very, very, very hard question. What's your favorite crystal? What's my favorite? How can you ask me that? I guess that changes from month to month, but the ones that I guess I'm working with most, probably black tourmaline. Yeah, probably black tourmaline, amber, garnet, mookaite, lodolite. And I mean, when it comes to looking at it, amethyst. I can't leave a crystal shop without buying an amethyst cluster because they're just so pretty. But yeah, I guess they are those. It's usually either crystals that have very grounding, protective energies, or energies that have something to do with psychic abilities, dream work, meditation, trance work, and stuff like that. Yeah, so let's wrap it up. Those were all the questions for today. If you have any further questions, put them in the comments. I tend to read, hopefully, all of the comments. I can't always reply to all of them, but I try my best. So if you have any further questions, put them in the comments. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up. And also, of course, check out my Instagram and TikTok and my online shop. Something fun is happening with my online shop, so stay tuned. And if you want to maybe support my channel, maybe consider becoming my patron. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!